my mother stood on my nursing diploma with her muddy gardening shoes and told me that my sister Megan needed the frame for her GED certificate. The paper lay on the kitchen floor when I walked in from my graduation ceremony. The ceremony she refused to attend because Megan had a nail appointment scheduled at the same time. I froze in the doorway watching her grind her heel into the paper until brown streaks smeared across my name and the state seal. I asked what she was doing and my voice sounded far away even to me. 4 years of night classes while working 2 jobs and raising my daughter Lily alone. And this was what waited for me at home. My mother said Megan passed her GED test the day before and needed a nice frame, so people could see she accomplished something meaningful. She bent down and picked up my diploma like it was scrap paper, inspecting the tears her boots had left behind. She said the wood frame was perfect and not like the cheap plastic ones from the discount store. Then she started pulling at the corners, trying to separate the frame from my certificate. I reached for it, telling her I had just graduated hours ago, but she turned away, shielding it with her body as if I were stealing from her. She told me I already had a job lined up at the hospital and Megan needed the frame for interviews at the mall. She said first impressions mattered and Megan could not show up with something cheap. Then she added that nursing was not even that hard and I would just be following doctor's orders all day. When she yanked the certificate, it ripped down the middle. Half stayed under the glass and the other half floated to the floor. She held up the empty frame, admiring it, and said now Megan could hang her GED in the living room for everyone to see. I dropped to my knees, picking up the torn pieces, trying to see if tape could save it. I told her I missed holidays and birthdays, studying and paying off student loans. I said Megan studied for a few weeks and that was it. My mother said that showed determination and accused me of always being jealous of my sister. She said Megan needed time to find herself and now she was ready to shine. She told me to support her instead of making everything about me. Then she walked past me to grab a towel to clean the glass like nothing had happened. She said Megan was exploring her options and did not need to follow a traditional path like I did. Some people were special and needed room to grow. She polished the frame until it gleamed and told me I could print another certificate online anyway. She said Megan only got 1 GED and it deserved proper display. Lily came downstairs holding the glitter card she made for me at school. She asked why my paper was ripped. My mother told her I was being selfish and would not share with her aunt even though Megan needed the frame. My mother took the piece from Lily's hand and threw it in the trash. Lily said her teacher said I should be proud. My mother replied that teachers did not understand family dynamics and Megan had struggled more, so her accomplishments meant more. She said getting a GED at her age showed persistence while a nursing degree was just meeting expectations. She patted Lily's head like she was teaching her something important. Something inside me snapped and I told her I was taking Lily and leaving. I grabbed my keys and picked up my daughter. My mother blocked the door, saying she already promised Megan could babysit that night to practice for a daycare interview. She said Megan needed experience with children. I said Megan had never watched Lily or any child. My mother accused me of discrimination and said lack of experience did not mean lack of ability. She crossed her arms and said I was holding my sister back. Like always the doorbell rang and my mother rushed to answer it. Megan walked in wearing pajama pants and a stained shirt in the middle of the afternoon, asking about her frame without looking at me. I pushed past my mother with Lily clinging to my neck. My hands shook as I fumbled with the door. My mother yelled that I was dramatic and selfish. I ran down the porch steps to my car while Lily buried her face against my shoulder. My mother followed yelling as I tried to buckle Lily into her seat. My fingers slipped and the buckle would not cooperate. My mother banged on the window saying I could not leave like this. Lily started crying, asking what was wrong. I finally clicked the buckle and slammed the door. My mother tried to block the driver's side door but I forced it open. She grabbed the frame of the door and I pulled until she let go. I backed out fast enough that she had to jump away. In the mirror I saw her standing with Megan watching me leave. I drove straight to the hospital parking lot because I had nowhere else to go. My hands still shook when I turned off the engine. The lot was half empty in the afternoon sun and I stared at the employee entrance where I would start work in a few days. Lily sniffled in the back seat, asking why Grandma was so mean about my special paper. I told her, sometimes grown-ups disagree and Grandma was not thinking clearly. Lily asked if we did something wrong and my throat tightened. I told her we did nothing wrong and that I was proud of her card. She asked where we would sleep and I told her we would figure it out, even though I had no idea how. A woman knocked on my window and I jumped, hitting my knee. It was Sarah from the hospital orientation, wearing scrubs and holding coffee. She asked if I was okay and when I tried to answer nothing came out except tears. Sarah opened the door and crouched beside me, listening as everything spilled out about the diploma and my mother and having nowhere to go. She handed me napkins and did not interrupt. She asked if I had family or friends and when I shook my head she offered her spare room for the night. She said it was no trouble and gave me her address. I thanked her over and over and she smiled, saying that was what coworkers were for. Her apartment was small and clean with photos of her daughter on every wall. She set Lily up with snacks and cartoons and made me sit at the table with a glass of water. She asked about my job start date and savings and I realized everything I owned was still at my mother's house. My phone buzzed with messages from my mother accusing me of overreacting and hurting Megan. She demanded I come home and apologize, then threatened to call the police. For a wellness check I showed the messages to Sarah and she told me to ignore them. She said my mother was using guilt to pull me back. I silenced my phone and set it face down. Later, the doorbell rang and an older woman came in carrying a casserole. Sarah introduced her as her mother Carol. She shook my hand warmly and said she knew a landlord who helped hospital employees. She said I should not go back if I did not feel safe and told me. Emotional abuse was still abused that night. I lay awake on the couch, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, thinking about that word and all the times my mother chose Megan over me, missing my milestones and dismissing my efforts. The diploma was not an accident but part of a pattern. I cried quietly into the pillow so Lily would not hear, realizing for the first time that I might never earn my mother's approval and that maybe it was time to stop trying. The next morning I sat at Sarah's kitchen table while Lily colored quietly on the floor, sunlight coming through the window like nothing had happened. I called the hospital human resources line with shaking hands and explained that I was a new hire dealing with an unexpected housing emergency. The woman on the phone named Allison listened carefully and told me the hospital had an employee hardship fund for situations exactly like this. She explained it offered short-term loans with low interest paid back through paychecks. I felt my shoulders loosen for the first time since the kitchen floor incident. After I hung up, Sarah made eggs and toast and acted like this was a normal morning. She asked practical questions about my start date and commute and never once made me feel like a burden. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again, but this time it was my mother demanding I return immediately, accusing me of hurting the family and keeping Lily away out of spite. I did not respond. I turned the phone face down and focused on helping Lily with a puzzle. The silence felt heavy but also strangely peaceful that evening. Carol returned with a folder of apartment listings and said she would help me look the next day. She spoke calmly and confidently like someone who had done this before. She told me I deserved a safe place and that leaving did not make me ungrateful. Hearing someone say that out loud felt unreal. We ate leftovers together while Lily chatted happily, and I realized how long it had been since a meal felt calm. The following morning we drove across town to view apartments. The first was dark and smelled like mildew. The second was clean but far beyond what I could afford. By the third, I was exhausted and discouraged. Then Carol took me to an older building near the hospital. The landlord was kind and straightforward. The apartment was small but clean and quiet. He said he would waive the deposit because Carol vouched for me. My chest tightened as I pictured Lily sleeping there safely. Back at Sarah's apartment, I filled out the hardship loan application on her laptop. My hands trembled as I typed about leaving my mother's house and needing stability for my daughter. I submitted the form and closed the computer, feeling exposed and hopeful at the same time. That night my phone lit up again with messages from my mother accusing me of abandoning her and ruining Megan's achievements. I put the phone on silent and went to bed early. 2 days later I received a call confirming the loan approval. I sat on the edge of the couch, gripping the phone while Lily danced around the room. I thanked the woman on the line repeatedly and felt tears burn my eyes. The next morning Sarah drove me back to my mother's house to collect our belongings. When we arrived, garbage bags were stacked on the porch. My stomach dropped as I opened one and saw my clothes folded carelessly inside. The locks had been changed and my mother did not answer the door. Through the window I saw her sitting on the couch watching television like nothing was wrong. Sarah squeezed my shoulder and helped load the bags into her car. Inside the bags I found a note written in my mother's handwriting saying, I did not deserve nice things if I was going to abandon my family. She said Megan needed my laptop more than I did. I crumpled the note and felt something inside me. Hardened. Sarah insisted we file a police report for the missing items. The officer listened politely and wrote everything down. He said family disputes were complicated, but documentation mattered. Walking out of the station, I felt both foolish and relieved, like I was finally taking my situation seriously. That night, Lily slept curled against me on the couch and whispered that she liked Sarah's house because it was quiet. The next morning, my mother added me to a group message with relatives, accusing me of cruelty and selfishness. People I barely knew chimed in telling me to forgive and forget. I stared at the screen, feeling sick and unseen. Then I left the group and blocked every number. It felt drastic, but necessary. The quiet afterward felt like standing in fresh air. Moving day came quickly. Carol and 2 friends helped carry our things into the new apartment. The furniture was mismatched and secondhand, but it was ours. Lily ran from room to room, laughing, and chose the corner by the window for her bed. She taped her glitter congratulations card to the wall and told me it was so I would remember I was smart. I stepped into the bathroom and cried silently into a towel. My first shift at the hospital arrived soon after. I dropped Lily at school and drove to work with my heart racing. My supervisor Mark introduced himself and walked me through the unit. He had kind eyes and a calm voice that steadied me. When he asked how I was settling in, I hesitated, then told him briefly about my family situation. He listened without judgment and assured me security would be informed in case my mother appeared that afternoon. Megan began texting me, accusing me of ruining her life and sabotaging her job prospects. She said I thought I was better than her and always had. The messages kept coming until my hands shook. I blocked her number and put my phone away. Part of me still wished she would understand, but another part knew she never had. The next day, Sarah offered to help me pick up groceries. We walked the aisles, calculating every dollar. Lily needed new shoes, but I could not afford them yet. I bought rice and pasta and store-brand everything. At the register, I declined the charity donation and felt embarrassed even though no one noticed. Later that night, Lily had a nightmare about my mother chasing us. I held her and told her we were safe now, even as my own heart raced. Few days later, the school called to say someone claiming to be me had tried to authorize my mother to pick Lily up. My stomach dropped as I drove there immediately. The principal reassured me Lily was safe and had followed protocol. I filled out paperwork listing myself as the only authorized pickup. Driving home, Lily asked why Grandma tried to take her. I told her sometimes adults make bad choices, and it was not her fault. That evening my phone rang again from an unknown number. It was my mother crying and demanding I bail Megan out after another shoplifting incident. I said no and hung up. My hands shook as guilt washed over me, but I reminded myself that saving Megan would not teach her anything. I sat on the floor of the living room, breathing slowly, until the feeling passed. Later that week, Megan showed up outside my apartment building crying and demanding I let her stay. When I refused, she turned angry and accused me of betrayal. I threatened to call the police, and she finally left. My neighbor Harold knocked later to check on me and said he would keep an eye out. Knowing someone noticed made the apartment feel less lonely that night. I lay awake listening to Lily breathe in her room, thinking about how much had changed in such a short time. The fear was still there, but so was something new. A sense that maybe I could build a life separate from the chaos I grew up with. I stared at the ceiling and promised myself that this apartment would be a place of peace, even if it took everything I had to make it so. A few days after Megan showed up outside my building, I realized I could not keep living in a constant state of waiting for the next confrontation. My hands shook every time my phone buzzed, and Lily started checking the locks before bed. Even though I tried to act calm, for her sake, the tension followed us through every room. I called the school again and explained what happened. They documented everything and assured me they would alert me immediately if my mother or Megan tried anything again. That same afternoon, my phone rang while I was at work, and this time it was the school secretary telling me my mother had come by earlier, claiming I gave verbal permission for her to take Lily home. They refused and called security when she raised her voice. My knees nearly buckled hearing that, and I had to sit down in the supply room. Mark found me a few minutes later and I told him what happened. His expression hardened and he said we needed to take steps to keep me safe. Mark walked me down to administration and helped me fill out paperwork to notify hospital security. He said my mother would not be allowed on my floor or anywhere near my work area. He told me I was not causing trouble and that the hospital took employee safety seriously. Hearing that made me realize how different this environment was from the house I grew up in. Here people believed me without demanding proof or minimizing my fear. That night Lily clung to me, asking why Grandma kept trying to take her away. I told her gently that Grandma was not respecting our rules and that I was making sure we stayed safe. She nodded quietly and asked if we could keep the light on. I agreed and sat beside her bed until she fell asleep, watching her chest rise and fall while my heart ached, knowing she carried fears no child should have. The next morning, I went to the courthouse with a folder full of screenshots and notes. My hands trembled as I filled out the forms requesting a temporary restraining order. Writing everything down felt like peeling open wounds I had spent years ignoring. When the clerk told me a judge would see me that day, my stomach twisted, but I stayed because turning back no longer felt possible. The courtroom, I described my mother standing on my diploma and blocking the door and trying to take Lily from school. My voice cracked when I talked about Lily crying in the car. The judge listened carefully and reviewed my evidence. When she signed the temporary order, my chest felt tight and hollow at the same time, relief mixed with grief in a way I did not know how to untangle. That night, Lily woke screaming from another nightmare and I held her until she calmed, telling her Grandma could not come near her school anymore. She asked if Grandma still loved her and I said yes because I did not want to burden her with adult truths. After she fell asleep, I sat alone on the couch, staring at the wall, realizing I was mourning a mother who was still alive. Over the next week, letters began arriving through relatives, each one switching between blame and guilt and apologies that were not really apologies. I photographed every envelope and page and added them to my folder. Driving to the police station again made me feel exposed, but the officer confirmed these were violations and documented everything. Each report felt like another brick in a wall I never wanted to build. Work became my refuge during that time. Learning routines and caring for patients gave my mind something else to focus on. Mark checked in regularly and adjusted my schedule so I could pick Lily up without rushing. Sarah brought over groceries one evening and insisted it was not charity but friendship. That word still felt strange but comforting. One afternoon, Megan appeared at the hospital. Security stopped her before she reached my unit, but the incident left me shaking for hours. Mark sent me home early and told me to take care of myself. Sitting in my car, I realized how far my family was willing to go to pull me back into their chaos. The fear slowly turned into resolve. A few days later, I attended my first therapy appointment. The office was quiet and smelled faintly of tea. The therapist named Hannah listened as I told her everything, starting with the diploma on the floor. She called my experience emotional abuse and said my guilt was a learned response. Hearing that made me cry harder than I had in months. Someone finally named what I had lived through. Hannah helped me practice setting boundaries, using simple statements that did not invite argument. It felt awkward and stiff, but also empowering. She reminded me that protecting Lily was not cruelty but responsibility. I left the session feeling raw but lighter. Like I had set down a weight I did not realize I was carrying. The permanent restraining order hearing arrived 3 weeks later. My mother and Megan sat on one side of the courtroom, dressed neatly like this was a misunderstanding. My mother looked at me with practiced sadness. The lawyer spoke about family conflict and painted me as overreacting. When it was my turn, I presented everything calmly and steadily. The judge reviewed the violations and signed the order for 3 years. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt numb. My mother muttered that I would regret this someday, and Megan shot me a look full of hatred. I kept walking because stopping would only pull me back into their orbit. In my car, I sat quietly letting the reality settle. This chapter of my life had ended whether I was ready or not at home. Lily asked if we could do movie night and we curled up on the couch with popcorn. Halfway through the movie she leaned against me and said she liked our apartment because it felt safe. Tears filled my eyes and I held her a little tighter. That single word mattered more than any approval I had chased before weeks passed and the tension slowly eased. Lily slept through the night more often and stopped checking the locks. I paid my bills carefully and even managed to save a little. Sarah and Carol became fixtures in our lives, dropping by with meals or advice, or just company. I realized family did not have to hurt to be real. One evening, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown account. It was Megan apologizing and saying she wanted to fix things. Hope flickered briefly until the message shifted into accusations and demands. I blocked her and felt the hope extinguish. Some patterns did not change no matter how much I wished they would. Hannah and I talked about grief during my next session. She explained I was grieving the idea of a loving mother more than the actual relationship. Accepting that truth hurt but also freed me. I could stop trying to earn something that was never offered. That realization settled into my chest like a quiet resolve the night before my 6-month work anniversary. I hung my replacement diploma on the living room wall in a simple black frame. Lily stood beside me and smiled proudly. I told her nobody would ever take it down again. She nodded like she understood the promise behind my words. In that moment I knew the life we were building was stronger than the one I left behind. Life did not suddenly become easy after the restraining order, but it became quieter. The kind of quiet that lets you hear your own thoughts instead of bracing for the next explosion. My shifts at the hospital settled into a steady rhythm and I started to feel competent instead of constantly anxious. Mark trusted me with more responsibility and paired me with nurses who taught instead of criticized. Each small success at work rebuilt a piece of confidence my mother had spent years eroding. Lily began to relax in ways I did not notice right away. She laughed louder when watching cartoons and stopped asking me every night if the door was locked. She started inviting classmates to sit with her at lunch and told me stories about them at dinner. One afternoon her teacher emailed saying Lily had been especially kind to a new student who seemed scared. I read that message 3 times and felt something warm bloom in my chest. Money was still tight but no longer terrifying. I learned how to stretch groceries and paid a little extra on my loans when I could. The hardship fund deductions came out of my paycheck automatically and I stopped flinching every time I checked my balance. I even bought Lily the new shoes she needed after saving for 2 weeks. Watching her run across the living room in them like they were treasures reminded me why every sacrifice was worth it. Sarah remained a constant presence. She stopped by with her daughter on weekends, and the girls played on the floor while we drank coffee at my wobbly table. Sometimes we talked about work or parenting, and sometimes we sat in companionable silence. One afternoon, she told me she was proud of how far I had come since the parking lot breakdown. Hearing that from someone who had seen me at my lowest felt grounding in a way. Praise from my mother, never. Head Carell helped me apply for a hospital scholarship program that would cover part of my student loans if I stayed for several years. Filling out the paperwork at my kitchen table felt surreal. No one in my family had ever invested in my future like that. When the acceptance email arrived a few weeks later, I cried quietly while Lily did homework beside me. It felt like a door opening instead of closing. Therapy with Hannah became a space where I could unpack memories I had buried for decades. We talked about childhood moments I once dismissed as normal, like my mother missing my graduations or mocking my ambitions. Hannah helped me see patterns of favoritism and control that explained so much of my adult guilt. Some sessions left me drained, but others left me lighter. Like understanding gave me back pieces of myself, despite the restraining order. My mother continued, trying to reach me through extended family. My aunt called, saying my mother had been ill and needed support. The old reflex to rush in flared, but I remembered Hannah's words about choices and consequences. I told my aunt calmly that my mother had other support and I could not be involved. My hands shook after hanging up, but I did not cry. That felt like progress. One evening while helping Lily with math homework, I noticed how relaxed she looked. Her shoulders no longer hunched and her brow no longer furrowed with worry. She asked if we could have movie night every Friday and make popcorn like a tradition. I agreed immediately, and those nights became anchors in our week. Blankets piled on the couch and laughter filling the apartment. Simple moments that felt like healing. The permanent restraining order did not erase the grief. Some nights I still lay awake wondering if I had done the right thing, imagining an alternate version of my mother who celebrated my graduation and protected me instead of tearing me down. Hannah called this grief work and said it was normal to mourn what never existed. Accepting that truth hurt but also freed me from chasing it. Megan tried reaching out again through social media. Her messages followed the same cycle of apology turning into accusation. Each time I blocked another account, my resolve strengthened. I began to see that my sister was not trapped by my mother the way I once believed. She chose the dynamic because it benefited her. That realization was painful but clarifying. That work Mark offered me extra weekend shifts. The additional income gave me breathing room, and the sense of being needed boosted my confidence. Lily adjusted to the after-school program without complaint and made friends there too. Watching her adapt reminded me how resilient children can be when they feel secure. One Saturday my neighbor Harold invited us to a small courtyard barbecue. I almost declined out of habit, but Lily's excitement decided for me. The gathering was simple and friendly. People asked about my job and listened without judgment. Lily ran off to play with other kids and I stood chatting about mundane things like weather and broken elevators. No one asked about my family or made me feel like I needed to explain myself. It felt normal in the best way. During one therapy session, Hannah asked me what I wanted my life to look like 5 years from now. The question startled me because I had spent so long just surviving. I talked about advancing at the hospital and giving Lily stability and maybe going back to school someday. Saying those dreams out loud felt risky but empowering. Hannah smiled and said it sounded like a life built on intention instead of reaction. My mother's letters eventually stopped. Whether from enforcement or exhaustion, I did not know. The silence was unsettling at first but gradually became another layer of peace. I focused on routines and rituals that made our apartment feel like home. Plants on the windowsill and photos on the walls, and Lily's artwork taped everywhere. One afternoon, Lily came home excited about an upcoming school play and asked who would come watch her. I hesitated, then said Sarah and Carol would be there. Lily nodded happily and did not ask about her grandmother. That quiet acceptance broke my heart and healed it at the same time. As months passed, the guilt dulled into something manageable. It still surfaced during holidays or when I saw other mothers and daughters laughing together, but it no longer dictated my choices. Hannah reminded me often that protecting Lily was an act of love, not cruelty. I held on to that during moments of doubt. The hospital scholarship funds were applied to my loans and my monthly payment dropped. For the first time I imagined a future without crushing debt. I celebrated by taking Lily to her favorite pizza place and letting her order dessert. She told me between bites that she was proud of me for helping people at work. Her words mattered more than any praise I had ever wanted from my mother. I started attending a support group for adult children of controlling parents at a community center. Listening to others share stories that mirrored my own made me feel less alone. One woman hugged me afterward and said it gets easier. Driving home that night, I believed her for the first time. The life we were building was not perfect or flashy, but it was stable and kind in ours. Each day added another layer of safety and trust. I stopped looking over my shoulder constantly and began looking forward instead. Even if the path ahead was uncertain, it felt like it finally belonged to me by the end of that season. I realized I no longer defined myself by my mother's approval or absence. I was a nurse and a mother and a person worthy of respect. Lily was growing in a space free from constant tension, and that alone made every hard choice worthwhile. The final shift of that year ended quietly. I walked out of the hospital into the cool evening air feeling tired in a good way, the kind of tired that comes from honest work rather than emotional exhaustion. Driving home I realized how different my body felt compared to months earlier. My shoulders were not hunched and my jaw was not clenched. The constant alertness that once lived under my skin had softened into something manageable. Home. Lily was waiting at the table with her homework spread out. She looked up and smiled when I walked in. That simple expression grounded me more than any deep breathing exercise ever had. We ate dinner together, talking about her day and the science project she was excited about. When she asked if we could do movie night, even though it was not Friday, I said yes without hesitation. Later that night, after Lily fell asleep, I sat alone on the couch and let myself think about my mother without immediately pushing the thoughts away. There was sadness there, but it no longer felt sharp. It felt distant, like an old bruise. I understood now that loving someone did not require accepting harm. That lesson had taken years to learn, and even longer to believe. The holidays came and went quietly. We decorated a small tree with handmade ornaments and baked cookies from a box mix. Sarah and Carol joined us for dinner, and Lily showed them her drawings with pride. There were moments when I wondered what my mother was doing and whether she felt lonely, but the thought passed without pulling me back into guilt. I reminded myself that loneliness caused by consequences was not mine to fix. In January, I received a performance review at the hospital. Mark told me I had adjusted quickly and showed strong instincts with patients. He encouraged me to apply for a specialized training program later in the year. Hearing that made something spark inside me. Ambition no longer felt dangerous or selfish. It felt possible. Therapy with Hannah continued, and our sessions shifted focus from crisis management to future planning. We talked about values and boundaries and how to recognize red flags in relationships. She pointed out how my nervous system responded differently now, how I paused before reacting instead of immediately accommodating. Those small changes felt monumental. One afternoon, Lily came home upset because a classmate had taken her crayons without asking. She told me she used her words and told the teacher instead of yelling or crying. I hugged her and praised her for setting a boundary. She smiled proudly, and I realized she was learning skills I never had at her age. The cycle was breaking in quiet, everyday moments. Spring brought longer days and more light into our apartment. I opened the windows and let fresh air move through the rooms. It felt symbolic, even if that sounded silly. Lily planted seeds in small cups on the windowsill and checked them every morning. When the first green shoots appeared, she squealed with excitement. Growth had become something we celebrated instead of feared. The support group became a regular part of my routine. Tuesday evenings were filled with stories that echoed my own and reminded me why I made the choices I did. Listening to others further along in their journeys gave me perspective. Healing was not linear, but it was real. And it was happening. One evening after group, I stopped by the grocery store and noticed I no longer calculated every item with panic. Money was still something I managed carefully, but it no longer defined every decision. That shift felt like freedom in its own way. Near the end of the school year, Lily brought home a flyer about the class play. She had a small speaking role and practiced her lines in the living room. On the night of the performance, Sarah and Carol sat beside me in the audience, cheering loudly. Lily spotted us and waved enthusiastically before remembering she was supposed to stay in character. Watching her on that stage, I felt a swell of pride so strong it almost hurt. After the play, Lily asked if she did a good job, and I told her she was amazing. She said she felt brave standing up there even though she was nervous. I told her bravery did not mean not being scared, it meant doing the thing anyway. She nodded like that made sense and held my hand tighter. That summer, I took Lily on a small camping trip to a state park. A few hours away, we slept in a tent and roasted marshmallows and walked trails pointing out birds and strange-shaped rocks. Lily declared it the best adventure ever and asked if we could make it a tradition. Sitting by the fire, I realized I was creating memories free from tension and fear. Memories that would not be overshadowed by someone else's emotions. On the drive home, Lily fell asleep in her seat, clutching her stuffed bear. I glanced at her in the mirror and felt a deep sense of gratitude, not for the hardship but for the strength that grew from it. I had learned to choose peace even when it was difficult, and that choice was shaping her world. Later that year, I received confirmation that I was accepted into the specialized training program Mark mentioned. It meant more responsibility and better hours. I celebrated quietly with Lily over ice cream on the couch. She asked if that meant I was moving up, and I said yes, in a way. She told me she knew I could do it because I never gave up. Hearing my daughter describe me that way reshaped how I saw myself. My mother's presence faded further into the background. Occasional mentions from extended family no longer carried the same weight. I responded with calm consistency or not at all. The restraining order remained in place, and for the first time, I stopped counting the days until it expired. Whether it was lifted someday or not, I knew I would not return to who I was before. One quiet evening, Hannah asked me what peace felt like in my body now. I closed my eyes and thought about it. Peace felt like unclenched hands and steady breathing and laughter in the next room. It felt like knowing I could handle whatever came next without abandoning myself. Apartment still had mismatched furniture and chipped paint, but it was filled with warmth and safety. Lily's artwork covered the walls, and my diploma hung proudly in its simple frame. Every time I passed it, I felt a quiet affirmation of my worth, not because of the degree itself but because I protected what it represented. As the year closed, I reflected on how much had changed since the day I walked into that kitchen and saw my mother's boot on my diploma. That moment shattered something, but it also revealed the truth I had been avoiding. I did not need to earn love by shrinking myself. I deserved respect simply by existing. Lily curled up next to me on the couch during one of our movie nights and said this was her favorite place in the world. Not the park or the campfire or the ice cream shop, just here with me. I kissed the top of her head and felt a certainty settle deep in my chest. We were safe, we were healing, and we were building a life defined not by what we escaped but by what we chose. The past no longer dictated our future, and for the first time I truly believed that we were going to be more than okay.